Others are often celebrated for their invention of the airplane, but it is Octave Chanute that deserves most of the credit. Octave Alexander Chanute came to the United States with his father in 1838 when he was 6 years old. He began a career surveying for the Hudson River Railroad Company. He was a self-taught engineer. He became known for his unusual designs for building bridges and railroad terminals and using different kinds of construction materials. Because of his work in preserving building materials, he invented a way to treat telephone poles and rail ties with creosote to keep them from falling apart. This technique is still in use today. By the age of 41, Octave Chanute was chief engineer of the Erie Railroad. Octave Chanute also designed the plan for Chicago's Union Stockyard and Transit Company. After his early retirement in his 50s, Octave Chanute had time to spend researching his passion and hobby, aviation, and the invention of the flying machine. He believed it was important to discuss problems of flight with other researchers, so he organized a group of experimenters for a conference in 1889 to work toward a flying machine that could carry a person. 3 years earlier, at such a conference, his ideas were laughed at, but in 1889 they discussed it more seriously. The American Association for the Advancement of Science was excited by the research, and because of this, Chanute organized a conference at the World's Columbian Exposition held in Chicago. They shared research and spoke of glider experiment, engine requirements, and materials needed for flying machines. The conference was a huge success. Octave Chanute wrote his book, Progress in Flying Machines, in 1894. This book is about all of mankind's attempts to fly. Chanute used his knowledge of bridge building and applied it to the designs of his gliders. In 1896, Octave Chanute designed the Katy-Dig glider, which had multiple wings with 6 on each side that could move left and right and help with experimentation. In the summer of 1896, he tested his Katy-Dig glider at Miller Beach, which was not far from his home in Chicago. They were very successful experiments, and one of them flew almost 400 feet. Later in the year, he built a smaller glider called the Chanute Herring biplane. This was stronger and only had 2 wings. Octave Chanute used his knowledge of brace box structure that he used when designing bridges. He applied this to the design of the gliders he built. Because he had so much knowledge and background, he acted as a teacher to other researchers and scientists who were also doing experiments. Wilbur and Orville Wright also had an interest in aviation, and they began researching gliders in 1896. They made a series of gliders known as the Wright Flyer. They made 3, beginning in 1900. The 1900 flight was the first glider they made, and the 1902 flight was the last of the gliders that they had made. All of the flights from 1900 to 1902 were mainly based on control, aerodynamics, and structures. These flights were entirely experimental. Every time they built a new glider or plane, they made it bigger. Octave Chanute wrote letters to the Wrights with advice on how to make a powered airplane. They always wrote back with more and more questions. Octave even sent helpers to the Wrights to serve them and help them with experimentations. Octave also once visited them in Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, to help them. With all of his background in engineering, he could help with many things, like the actual building of the engine. Octave and the Wrights mastered the building of the self-powered airplane. Although they never really worked side by side, Octave was one of the biggest influences on the Wright brothers. Without Octave Chanute, the course of aviation and history would be changed.